Welcome back to Tech Visa. This is episode number 11. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel for all the latest in Australian immigration news. We've got a regular guest on the show today, an exciting one. Em, welcome back. You actually got hold of me this time. You had some exciting updates come across your desk and you wanted to share them with our viewers and listeners. So let's do this.
Be prepared for regular updates like this from now until the end of the year. Since our last episode, very little time has gone past, but these are all relevant.
A few updates in regards to the student visa program. So two in particular. So today I really want to touch on this potential change from the genuine temporary entry requirements being replaced by the genuine student test. Can you just give us a little bit of insight into just very top line what the genuine temporary entry requirement is in regards to a student visa application, and then a bit more insight into exactly what this genuine student test is?
Following our last update as well as our session with StartMate recently with their student cohort, it's really important to not forget about that big student cohort in Australia. They are a really big supplement of the economy, helping us fill the skill shortage and gaps, as well as of upskilling and developing their skills further in Australia through our well-defined qualification framework. So the GTE high level one line is a subjective criteria that the department uses to be able to assess a student visa applicant's home country profile, their past studies in sort of history, as well as the economic conditions of the family or financial capacity to be able to afford to study in Australia. When I say subjective, it captures a lot, and it's been around for a long time, and now the government has realized that it's probably not efficient or effective anymore in being the major assessment criteria, so they are looking at changing it to the genuine student test. What is it? Well, the top one-liner, that's all we have right now because it's not formally introduced, is that it would allow the Department of Home Affairs to consider or offer consideration of highly skilled applicants that can contribute to Australia's workforce upon completion of their studies and help combat the nation's labour shortage. That basically means it's going to be less focus on economic conditions at home. It's more about coming to Australia, getting quality education, and then helping the Australian economy and fill that skill shortage. Hopefully we'll hear more, we'll get proper policy on what that means, which we're thinking probably going to be all together towards the end of the year, but at least it's definitely in the making.
Now, Em, just to get your perspective on this, is this a positive change? Is this a step in the right direction?
I definitely think it is a step in the right direction in terms of addressing Australian shortages in terms of skills and needs, but also making sure that we allow the suitable cohort of applicants to be able to come to Australia. So focus a little less on what's happening back home. We're quite fortunate in Australia to be in a well-established economy, a well-developed country where lots of the less developed or developing country applicants tend to get treated quite harshly because of how the GTE criteria has been applied to them.
So staying on the topic of student visas, but now shifting our focus a little bit to the education providers. So I've seen this a lot recently. There's been a number of articles posted, and it's around education providers exploiting the system by misusing the concurrent enrolment function of the student visa program. So, Em, let's dive into this a little bit deeper. What is the concurrent enrolment function, and how are these education providers exploiting this?
In a nutshell, the Australian Department of Home Affairs or the Education Department that manages international students have a PRISM. It's a system that they use to track or keep tabs on all international students as they come to Australia. The system is potentially locked when a student comes and starts their studies. So when that is locked, that student is basically tied to the education provider and cannot chop and change. What's been happening or what's being covered in the media right now is that people are enrolling into package courses. So let's say they do a Cert 3, Cert 4, that might lead to a diploma, advanced diploma, or even say a diploma towards a degree. But people are coming in at that lower end level. As soon as they get into Australia, then they go, you know what, I got this big COE to be able to get here. The proposed plan was to do 3, 4, 5 years of study. But I've changed my mind now. I just want to do the lower end studies elsewhere, maybe more cost effective. Maybe the education provider that they are looking at into the new one is less stringent in terms of attendance, academic conduct, and sort of academic performance. So they will then just change providers in the sense that they come on shore. There's agencies out there, or they do on their own accord to then do that. Therefore, some of the ghost colleges we've been hearing about in the media covered in Melbourne have been sort of utilizing this as a bit of a loophole to attract students and say, hey, come enroll here rather than paying big university fees, come to our college and pay lower fees to get you the visa, to allow you to do whatever that it is you need to do, maybe work supplementary on the side, which is obviously the purpose of it. You can work part-time to support your studies, not the other way around. So it doesn't really affect anyone that's already in Australia that have had this change. So if you already come onshore, had this arrangement and on that path on the new course, then you're okay. But going forward, the department has implemented that the student visa applicant, whatever they enrolled in originally, must complete at least 6 months of the highest enrolled course. So let's say that's a diploma, advanced diploma to a degree, that they have to do the degree for up to 6 months with the original education provider before they'll be formally allowed to be released to change to a different education provider through the PRISM system. So I think the solution there is to be able to also show more financial savings at the time of applying, which is a 17% increase from what it was, I think a little over 21,000 annually to $24,505 or Australian dollars in savings to support each year of the academic studies that you've enrolled in. And the department's really strict. So if you're like short by a couple $100, sorry, you might not be able to get your visa. So it's an important criteria.
Moving on, the state allocations for the subclass 190 visa, we are seeing an enormous reduction in numbers here. Really important for us from a tech visa perspective is managing client expectations here. So talk to me a little bit more about the reduction in these allocated numbers for the subclass 190 visa this year.
It's finally here. So on the 24th of this month, the department has released the state allocated numbers. It's significantly reduced compared to last year. Like I'll do two examples or two comparisons. So Victoria government had 9,000 last financial year, but this financial year ending 30th of June 2024, they only have 2,700, which is still the highest out of all the states. The next one on that scale was in New South Wales. This year they have been given 2,650. Last year they had about 5,500. So I think the focus or the shift that we're seeing from the government level is that they are focusing more on employer-sponsored options towards permanent residency, which they're making more streamlined by the end of the year, allowing 2 years on the 482 then transition towards permanent residency. So that's the rationale behind it. Will the 190 still be around, or the 491? They will be around, but look like they will be more competitive. So it could get to a point where we had, additional criteria that each state and territory can implement, so they only capture the number of migrants that they want to capture, maybe specific occupations and things like that. So none of that have been yet introduced by any state and territory, but they have acknowledged that they are working with the government with the allotted numbers that they've been given.
General practitioners, doctors, no more workforce certificates for GPs in metropolitan areas. What's going on here?
DACAs has been a newish one. So I think in 2017 or 2018, I can't recall exactly, is when it was first introduced. The government's announcement or direction was that visas for sort of graduate doctors or GP programs needed to be better distributed. They wanted more people to work in rural, regional, or remote areas rather than metropolitan areas, which was, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, for immigration purposes. They wanted to make Australian people have better access to doctors in the regional, rural, and remote areas, and that's why they introduced this workforce certificate. Basically forced a 482 nominating employer to lodge these certificates with a government body and get it approved before the department would process the relevant 482 visas. That obviously restricted a lot of junior doctors from going into practice or going into GP practice where they wanted to. Yeah, the government justification was offers more training programs and offer more metropolitan jobs to Australian graduates. I think because of the current processing direction 100, where the focus is on healthcare, the government has realized that this is not helping, and I think metropolitan areas are also still struggling to have enough GPs to be able to service. So what that effectively means is that the workforce certificate program actually cease from the 16th of September 2023, which is a little over 2 weeks from now. And therefore, international medical graduates looking to work in primary care within Australia will no longer be required to submit a health workforce certificate as part of the visa application for the 482.
So we briefly touched on the genuine temporary entry requirements for student visas. We've seen a heightened interest around GTE requirements for the specialized project-based visa, which is a subclass 400, but as well as the business visitor visas, so the subclass 600. What's happening here?
Like I say, the genuine temporary immigrant is the subjective criteria that the Department of Home Affairs use quite wildly, like you say, mentioned different programs. So there's the 400, the 500 student, and the 600, which is the business visitor. For those that are intending to visit for business visitor activities. The rationale we're getting from the department is that they are constantly changing their processing guidelines in accordance to country profiles that the Department of Home Affairs collect across different government bodies. So these country profiles are updated based on the political, economic, and natural sort of disaster circumstances, as well as application trends from a specific country for a specific visa type at the department. So they then apply the GTI a bit more harsher to certain nationals if they are wanting to come, if they are seeing a trend of them applying for something that is not appropriate in the sense of meeting the need of the applicant, lodging sort of for refugee status when there is no prosecution or valid claims could lead to that. So what that basically means is that if a small number of country's national apply or do the wrong thing, that could impact the general population of that specific country passport holder to be able to then get the right temporary visa to come and service any Australian businesses or employers.
Thanks again for your time. And if you did enjoy this episode, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and we'll see you next time.